Good. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the power of data-informed creativity. My name is Brooke Palizi, and I'm the Director of Marketing at the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center. For those of you who may not know, the Nasdaq Center is a nonprofit improving access and knowledge in entrepreneurship to advance economic progress for all. As you'll see in the chat in a moment, the Nasdaq Center provides programs, resources, and exceptional mentorship to help entrepreneurs fuel prosperity, no matter where you are in your journey. Be sure to check out the links and resources shared in the chat. We're going to launch a few polls to step back and take a temperature gauge on how all of you are doing today. We use this information to guide the programs we provide for this global community of entrepreneurs. If there is any specific topic or challenges you'd like us to create resources for, please feel free to share them in the chat. And while you fill those out, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes before we get started. First, please let us know where you're dialing in from. We'd love to know that as we spend our time together today. Oh gosh, I'm seeing there's some really great questions and the answers. It looks like we've got some great optimism happening right now. Second of all, we'll have a live Q&A at the end of the event, so feel free to submit your questions at any time using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We'll do our best to get to as many of them as we can. And while you're answering the next one, where it looks like we're pretty evenly spaced out across um, all the different options there, I wanted to take a quick moment to recognize the incredible support of our corporate partners. The work we do at the center would not be possible without the generosity and belief of our partners and funders. Those include Nasdaq, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, KPMG, Walmart, the Asia Innovation Hub, Wilson Sonsini, the Nareet Foundation, and BPM. We are deeply grateful for their partnership, and we hope you'll join us today in sharing that appreciation. All right, so it looks like finance is at the top of the list for us today with what's keeping us up at night. We have a number of really incredible classes coming up, so please make sure to sign up for them in that area with sales and marketing, sales and scale coming up right after that. So all of those are covered in some of our upcoming classes. All right, excellent. So without any further delay, please join me in giving a warm welcome to our special guest, Tasha Blackman, founder and CEO of Blackman Digital Consulting.
Hi, Brooke. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm
Oh,
excited for
so
this conversation.
I'm so glad to have you here. So glad to have you here.
Totally.
Take it away.
Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so I'm really excited to chat with you all today about the power of data-informed creativity. I know oftentimes we hear the word data and we're like, oh my gosh, that's lots of information. What do we do about that? So I'm going to take you through some couple different frameworks that you can leverage on how do you leverage data in your business so that it can inform the creativity, and creativity being like your visuals, your messaging, especially as an early stage founder, so that you can build marketing that resonates with your core consumer. But before we get started, I wanted to talk about, my background. So, as mentioned, I own Blackman Digital Consulting, and it's a marketing advisory where I provide hands-on fractional leadership for growing e-commerce and retail brands. I help them build their marketing foundation so that they can drive consistent revenue over time, acquire new customers, retain those customers, and build brand loyalty. I'm a former senior marketing executive at Macy's, Francesca's, and Lord& Taylor, and have had great experience creating really strong integrated marketing strategies for global brands. And what's also interesting is that I've worked across organizations of all sizes. I've worked with Fortune 200 companies to mid-size companies as well as startups. So I understand, based on the different phase of where you are in the business, all the different tools that you need to use. And also, I've also led initiatives for global brands and also helped teams that are lean go to market. So today, here's our agenda. We're going to talk about the challenge of competing for attention. Then I'm going to share with you this data and creativity flywheel in terms of how do you look at this and where do you want to land in terms of, this flywheel. And then also talk about insights, messaging, and lastly, alignment. And then I'll give you a couple tips that you can take away and implement in your business as early as today. But first, let's start with the obvious. Like, we all know that in today's world, attention is scarce and competition is higher than ever, right? Think about it. We're all being pulled in many different directions. We're all having to do lots of different things. Sometimes we'll go do something and we're like, what was I going to do? We're being bombarded with lots of information at all times. But we also know as a result of that, attention is the new currency. When you can earn and hold the intention of someone, you can start unlocking trust with them. You can start unlocking loyalty. And when you unlock all of those things, what you can do is start driving revenue in your brand. And as an early stage founder, this matters even more. And why is that? The fact of the matter is that there are new brands launching all the time, but it doesn't change the fact that your budgets are going to be tighter, your teams are going to be lean, but the work will still be there to be done at the end of the day. So I always talk about within your brand, how do you leverage the data and the insights that you have to work more efficiently, as well as get the results that you're looking for at the end of the day? Because why does this matter for you? Like, why do you need to look at your insights and your data to fuel your creativity? Because it can help your brand in so many different ways. It can help you acquire new customers when awareness is critical. It can help you do things like increasing your value, your average order value, so that every sale goes further. It's about boosting retention and repeat purchases to build loyalty early. One of the things I like to help a lot of brands think about their brand is making sure not to fall into the trap of building a leaky bucket. So when we think about a bucket, right, you've got a bucket and you're pouring water into this bucket and there are holes everywhere in this bucket, but you keep pouring water in and what happens? It just keeps flowing out. So when you're building your brand, it's thinking about when I acquire these new customers, I don't just want them to flow out of this bucket. I want them to stay in. I want them to stay with me. I want them to come back again. I want them to make another purchase. And not just that, I want them to fall in love with my brand. So they tell their friends, they tell their family members, they tell everyone how awesome this brand is so that you can build loyalty. So it's about making sure we're avoiding this leaky bucket syndrome. And then we also want, to act on what customers value when you leverage these data and this insight, right? You want to give them the things that they care about so that you can drive sustainable revenue growth with fewer missteps. But ultimately, it's how do you stand out in a crowded marketplace, even though you have limited resources? So this is a graph that I put together, and it's about, when we think about the data that you have in your brand, and we'll talk a bit more about where the places that this can come from. But looking at this, on our x-axis, we have creativity, right? From low to high. But then we also have the data from low to high. And there are different things that happen at different stages when looking at this graph. So when we look at, when your brand has low creativity and you're not using a lot of data and the insights, your brand is going to be invisible. We talked about there's a lot of noise out there. We're fighting for attention. If there's lack of creativity and there's a lack of use of data, your brand is not going to show up. But on the other side of that, let's say you're like super creative. You're like, oh man, this looks really good, but it's not necessarily rooted in anything, for your ideal customer. It's going to look fantastic. It's going to look flashy, but it's going to miss that mark. And then the other end of the spectrum, you're like, okay, we're low on creativity, but we used all the insights we have. It's smart, but it's forgettable. But the place you want to ultimately end up in is how do we get high creativity? So our visuals, our messaging, because it's informed by the data and the insight, like that's your sweet spot. That's high impact. That's when you start cutting through the noise. That's when your customer is like, I feel seen. Think about it yourself as a consumer. when you see an ad from a brand and you look at the creative, when you look at the messaging, you're like, oh my gosh, how did they know this was me? They're speaking to me. It's because they've figured out how to get into that sweet spot of being super creative that was informed by the data within their brand. I want to share an example that I lived through in the past with a client. And one of the challenges this client had was before coming on board and working with them, they invested in a beautiful photo shoot. When I saw it, I said, this looks beautiful. They worked with an awesome photographer that was really well known, and the photographer was given free rein. But the result that happened, and when I saw it, I said, wow, this looks like a denim ad. This looks fantastic. And they said, that's the problem. We're not a denim retailer, we're a beauty and wellness brand. This brand spent and invested in a photo shoot that looked gorgeous, but it didn't meet the need of what they were looking for to go to market. The creative couldn't be used. So, what was the solution? I said, okay, we can't go back and shoot something else. So let's first start with understanding who your ideal customer is and building that profile. Let's use customer insights like how does this person spend their time? How does this person feel about beauty and wellness space? At what points in their life do they use it? Where do they go to obtain these experiences? Let's use some of those insights to guide the visuals, and then let's be creative and select stock imagery that truly reflects this target customer. So we're building a profile on who this customer is that we're trying to reach and leveraging an existing resource of stock imagery that's available to us to truly represent this brand. And it ultimately resulted in a really successful brand launch where it was aligned with the customer. The customer felt seen. And also, it went on to the brand getting accolades within their first few months of launching. But the lesson here was utilizing data to fuel the creativity and the visuals as well as the messaging for this brand, but starting with an ideal customer profile. So I always say, regardless of where your brand is, whether you're new, you're going to market, if you're a brand have been around for a long time, you need to have a profile for your customer. So this is a tool that you can use to share with anyone in your brand when you bring in external partners, whether you're hiring new people, to make sure that everyone is on the same page in terms of who they're serving in this brand. These are the information, the things that you can put onto this customer profile. You'll talk about who's this customer, what's the demographic, what's the psychographic, what's the segment of this customer. You can pull this from all different parts of your business that you have data. Talk about what do they care about? What are the needs of this customer? What are the values? What are the pain points? As well as, who are the top performers in your brand? Who are the people that are spending a lot with you? Who are the people that are most loyal? Who are the ones that are spending, all their time with you as well as most likely to refer you? But also their journey is important. It's how do they find you? And ultimately, why do they stay with you? Because sharing this information, this customer profile tool, even if you're very early in your journey, it is critically important because it's always going to ensure that your team is aligned and that you are customer centric. So I talked a bit about, now we're going to talk about this data and creativity flywheel. So this is a flywheel that you can use in your business regardless of size. Big organizations use it, smaller organizations use it. Everyone creates a version of it. And it starts with the data. How do we turn the raw data into insights? That is the first step in this journey. The second step is you've got all these insights. What do you do with it? How do you turn these insights into ideas and concepts that you can test? The third one I always say you should always be doing in this brand, in your brand, is testing and learning. It's experiment to see what resonates. I love the testing and learning phase because oftentimes, as a founder, you can say, I think this is what's going to work. And then you run your test and you realize, oh, I was totally wrong. That didn't work at all. Testing and learning is so important. But even more so than testing and learning, the fourth one is how do you refine and share that information? So, how do you double down? How do you scale what works and align with the team so everyone's informed in terms of what is working? And also, when in the fourth stage of refining, if you need to go back into your test and learn, you absolutely can go back into that and then come back to the refine and share. And then this is a flywheel that keeps going on through the life cycle of your brand. And whenever you have an idea and you're like, oh my gosh, what do I do with this? You can follow this flywheel. So, just to break out and provide some clarity, I'm using the terms data and insights. So, data is the raw numbers. It's what happens. It's when you pull your reports, etc. It's the information that you're given. The insights is the meaning behind those numbers. What can you infer from it? Why it happened or what it means? And then the creativity comes in terms of how you act on those insights. How do you bring it to life with messaging, visual, and campaigns so that the customer can feel seen and that you can cut through the clutter? We talked about that sweet spot. Like, how do you get into that sweet spot so that you're delivering results? So here's an example. So here's an example of a shoe brand, that I made up in terms of how you take this data and what does that mean, right? Data shows what has happened. Creativity, how do I bring this to life to my consumer? So let's say in the example of the shoe brand, they had about 5,000 people that visited their site last week, right? But only 10 people bought shoes, not a ton. You're like, I need more people to buy shoes, but then you saw that 80% of your visitors came in through their mobile phone. But then when you dug into the data, you realize, wow, there's a high bounce rate on the product page. Bounce rate meaning the people that came, they saw and they left very quickly. Like there was something that happened when they got to this page that you realize they were just like, I'm out of here. Was the page loading too slow? Did they not like the copy? Did they not like the imagery? Did they not see the right products for themselves on there? So how you bring this to life is the insight. We know that, well, mobile visitors are bouncing before purchase. I need them to spend more time. We know that when people spend more time on your site, they're more likely to convert over time. So the problem when you triaged it, you saw, well, actually, our page loading time is pretty slow. And you realize when looking at your competitors, well, we don't actually have a really great mobile experience. So it sounds like we need to spend some time working on those things. So the action is you optimize your site speed and then layer in the creativity where you improve the product copy as well as the type of images that people saw, which would ultimately result in more visitors converting into buyers. So it's about data shows what matters, creativity, those visuals and those messaging, those insights informing so that you can ultimately convert. And conversions can be many different things that you define for your brand. A conversion can be more revenue. Conversion can be more email signups. Conversions can be, you want to increase the average order value. It's about how do I make sure we're selling more items in our transactions. Conversions can mean many different things for your brand based on the marketing strategy and your business goals. But it first starts with understanding the data and the performance in there and how do you tie that back to the creativity to get the result that you're looking for. So, why does this flywheel matter at the end of the day? Is that it'll help de risk your creative decisions. You're not guessing what will work, you're proving it out each time, right? You're starting with the data first, then you're looking at the insights, then you're testing and you're learning, and then you're refining and you're sharing. You're proving out what that hypothesis might be. You're also going to be accelerating learning without a big budget. When you're a smaller brand, you're always like, I don't have a ton of money to spend, or I just don't want to take that big risk. How can I test something without a big budget? This is how you do it. And also, the bigger brands are no different. The bigger brands, they always test small, refine it, and then scale it across their brands. And then lastly, it'll also allow you to build stories that connect with your audience and drives conversion. Because creative, grounded in data is going to drive both emotion and action, which is incredibly important. So now talking a bit about insights, messaging, and alignment. Making this flywheel work for you. It's about how do you guide creative with what your customers actually want, right? One of the things I always say is whenever you have a brand, it's about how do we make sure the customer is always at the center of all of your decisions. So when you're working on your brand, whether it's just you, whether you have a small team, I always advise pretend your ideal customer is sitting at the table with you and think about that customer as well as think about, is this going to make their life easier? Is this going to create friction for them? Making sure that they're the center of your decisions and also then refining the messaging and the visual so that it resonates and it converts and sharing this out with your team so that everyone's rowing in the same direction. So here's an example of an actual brand I worked across. One of the things we saw was that dresses was a core category for this business, but all campaigns were treated the same for all regions. And then one day we got a call from an associate in one of the stores in the southern markets, and she validated something that we saw in the data. This store, this brand had lots of boutiques across the US, but this was a little pocket we saw happening in the number, and a sales associate validated the information. So in certain southern markets during graduation, white dresses were worn during the graduation season. And again, we saw that validated in the numbers in the store sales. We also saw it on e-com, and it consistently peaked at the same time. So we stepped back and said, this is a really important insight. The data told us there's a spike in sales in these particular stores in this region. It's a particular type of product. It's white dresses. There's an opportunity for us to put resources around this so that we can elevate it more. So what we did was we said, let's create a region-specific dress campaign. Let's target graduation messaging in southern markets. And what we're going to do is we're going to highlight all the different white dress styles, different silhouettes with affordable pricing for college students. We wanted them to know we've got the dress for you. And not just that, it's also at a great value. And to make it easier for them, we said we'll host in-store graduation shopping parties. So come in, bring your friends. You each choose your own white dress, and that way you make sure not everyone's wearing the same white dress at graduations. But then we help them style with accessories, right? So we saw this opportunity for dresses, white dresses, different silhouettes. We also tied it back to accessories, but we also saw they bought other things in the store while they were there. So it was an opportunity to also grow the basket size for the customer. So the ultimate result was we saw that the white dress sales in these targeted markets increased significantly. And we did it once. We saw the data, right? We, built the insights, we created the campaign, we tested it and learned, we refined it, and we learned this is now going to be a signature campaign for this region every single year going forward. So it's how do we learn, implement, and then it also gave us the opportunity to say, well, this is just one example in one market. What's happening in other markets where there may be something similar, where it's very regional, so that we can tap into it. So we knew that this customer is an example. We leveraged all of our digital marketing. We segmented by region. We also called out the city in paid ads so that there was personalization and we can drive higher conversion. But this is a perfect example of how we use the data to create insights to drive the creativity. So I've been talking a lot about the data and, you know, having it and it's all around you, but there's so many places in your brand that you can pull this information. Oftentimes we may think, well, I'm small, I may not have a lot, or I'm early stage. There's data all around you. It's your website analytics. It's going into your GA Google Analytics tool. It's your social media, right? All of that is there as well. It's your paid ad performances. It's in there. I love surveys. I love polls. We had polls today. I love focus groups. I always say if you have access to your customer, you should absolutely be surveying them at different times. If you can have focus groups, because hearing it from your customer directly on the things that they need, this can help drive innovation in your brand as well. Because your customer might say, hey, I love this, but I realize I need this, but I always go somewhere else to get it because you're not offering it. That might be a white space opportunity in your brand to help develop. And then lastly, customer conversations. These are pure gold. It's them telling you exactly how they feel about you or what they, think is an opportunity. It's the message boards, social media, it's in person, it's the product reviews. If you have brick and mortar stores, your sales associates, they're on the front line. They're hearing, from customers, what's going on, what they're looking for. If you are in the business of apparel and fit, you're hearing directly from customers what's working, what's not working, on how to improve. Like, this is where it begins, and constantly looking at these things in your brand to refine it. So, here's an example again of it in action. It's, a founder has a skincare brand and they're perusing the message boards and people are talking about the product, and one person asked, is this safe for all skin types? But then they saw this repeating question, yeah, is this safe for all skin types? I don't know. So the insight is customers want to know about safety as well as can they use this? Anyone. So here the founder thinks about, how do I pivot my messaging to support this so that when the customer sees this next, it answers all of these questions. So in their messaging, they can layering messaging across their channels on their website, in their store signage around this is safe for all skin types, including sensitive skin, and then featuring models of different skin tones and ages so that they know that this is a product they can use. So you tested this idea, you learned, and you also applied it as well. Your customers are already telling you what to say. I can't stress this enough. If you're a brand, especially if you're in the retail product, e-commerce, your product reviews is another great way to say that. But this information is oftentimes being served up to you on a platter. And here's additional methods for finding customer language. It's review mining. It's, are they talking about you on Amazon? Do you have like a food product, let's say? Is it on Yelp they're talking about it? Reddit, site reviews, social listening, going across the comments, seeing UGC content, people that are posting, and also going through the comments of it and seeing what other people are saying as well. Message boards, DMs are another great place as well as feedback from sales associate as well as customer care. If you have a brand and you have a customer care department, Usually that's where a lot of this information lives first. I always advise when you have that customer care, it's how do you make sure that information gets down to all the different team members in your brand so that they can action against it. It's like you realize, let's say you're selling pants and one of the questions that keeps coming in, it's like, what's the inseam on this? What's the inseam on this? You're like, well, if enough people asked about the inseam, it means that the information may be missing on your website, or if it's not missing, maybe it's embedded in a lot of heavy, text copy. So how do you pull out that information so that when the customer sees it, they can quickly pinpoint it. And then that also frees up your customer care team as well to focus on other things within your brand. Another way is, a founder is looking at the information out there and they're saying, well, our differentiator is the cost, right? But the customers keep saying, I love your product. It's so easy to use. And you're like, no, but it costs less. It's a great cost. They're like, no, it's easy to use. So that means that you may have flexibility in your pricing structure and model because cost is not what's bringing them to you, it's your ease of use. So, how do you adjust your messaging and mirror language that customers are using to build trust with them to drive more conversion? And in this example, as a founder, you may question your pricing and saying, well, if it's not the cost and I lowered myself, maybe there may be some flexibility in my pricing structure. And I wanted to share two quick examples with you in terms of, brands that really refine their messaging with customer insight to grow. So Glossier is a brand that was started by Emily Weiss in terms of as a blog. It was called Into the Gloss. She built a really big platform and community, interviewing different people about their skincare and tips and different things they wanted to learn about skincare. And she started her career as an editor. And then she started creating all of this beauty content. And then she realized that there was this need where her community wanted everyday beauty. They didn't necessarily want the makeup. They wanted to first start with the blank canvas, their skin, and taking care of it, but taking care of it with the products that they needed so that they were showing up as their best selves. So, knowing that she'd built such a robust community, she thought, why not survey and poll this community to understand what they want from me first? Instead of going out and building a beauty brand with products aren't necessarily needed, let's first start them with asking, what do you want? So she surveyed her community and she found out that they wanted a cleanser and they wanted a cleanser that had all these different things. And she built a cleanser around that. And then she launched her brand with this one cleanser. And she realized, one of the language that people kept using, it was all about everyday beauty. It was all about their skin. So she shifted her messaging to focus on skin first and building all the different products around that. And then it's around makeup second. And one of the great results of that is she ended up building a cult following for her brand that ultimately scaled to $1 billion valuation. And I know sometimes we look at this brand and say, oh, well, they're $1 billion brand. I'm an early stage founder. But really, the really true message in this is she started with a community and asking questions, asking about, what do you actually want? Surveying, polling, one of the things I talked about where you can get that data to inform what's next. And this was an example of how do you use that information to drive innovation in your brand and create a product with a really strong following that then informed future products so that you were always creating what people wanted versus what you think people wanted. Another fun example is Chubby Shorts. So Chubby Shorts was created by some people, some friends who they wanted to make shorts that were just fun. Shorts, I guess at the time were really serious, and they said, let's make shorts that are really fun. And they started with this concept of it's just fun shorts for the weekend. But then, because their brand was so humorous, customers started responding with humor of their own. A lot of meme culture, a lot of community stories. And then they realized that this was more than fun shorts for the weekends. They were building a community around people that, wanted clothes that reflected them, that they can wear all the time. It was about how do we make sure we're having fun and using that information to drive community to help us grow our brand and inform the product offering, but also how our customers wanted us to show up as a brand. So they shifted to the weekend has arrived because that's usually where the fun happens, on the weekend. And the result was they ended up building a loyal following and they scaled their business through word of mouth. So again, example of a brand who listened to their community and they pulled insights from all different places to shift their messaging and how they showed up in this world. So you've got all these insights, you're testing and you're learning, but what's like the next piece of this? I always say alignment is what's going to keep your team focused and collaborative in this process. When you have all this information, you have all this learning, it's how do you make sure everyone is on the same page? So even if you might be the only person, making sure that you have alignment with yourself based on what's happening in your brand. So here's a tool in terms of, you've got all these tests going, you've got all these learnings, but you want to make sure you keep yourself organized in the process. So recapping your learning is a key critical piece, especially if you're early stage. Keep it short. You don't have to spend 5 hours recapping. It's what are the quick wins? Like what worked, right? What are the challenges? What didn't go as planned in this? And insights, what did you learn in all of this? And then not just what worked, what didn't work, what didn't go as planned, and what did you learn. It's what do you need to change in upcoming marketing or even in your business strategy based on the learning. That is where the magic happens within your brand. It's how do I take this and what do I need to change to get the results, and you keep going around. And lastly, the most important step is ownership in this. Who is responsible for doing what and by when? And then you start the process over again. But you're going to use the structure after campaigns, after launches, after events, because as your business grows, you're going to want to have documentation of the things that you did because you're wearing obviously many hats and you're not going to remember in 3 months the test that you did and exactly what came out of it and what you need to do differently for next year. But this is a great way to keep track of what's happening in the brand. But also, you share this document with everyone for visibility so everyone learns what's happening. But this is particularly strong document to have for people that are helping you with the creative, the visual and messaging, because it helps guide them in terms of what worked and didn't work. So they can keep that information in mind for when they're creating things for the future. And what does recaps do for your business? It helps build a culture of learning, not blame, because marketing is always about testing and learning, testing and learning. So making sure you're infusing that culture of learning within your organization, even from the early stage. It helps turn every campaign into a source of insights. Don't run campaigns just to run a campaign. You're running a campaign because you're looking for specific measurable results. There are certain metrics you're looking for, and there are specific insights you're looking for. And it also just keeps everyone aligned and moving forward in the right direction. So here's a quick 30-day roadmap that I recommend, for your brand that you can implement in terms of testing this process, utilizing the flywheel, building your recaps, and sharing it out with your teams. So today, tomorrow, next week, you can look at your brand and pick a data source and an insight. You can go to your Shopify, you can go to your Instagram, you can go to your Google Analytics and say, I want to look at this one piece of data that keeps coming up. And this is the insight I think that is coming as a result of this. And then run a creative test across your marketing channels based on the insight, right? If you're a brand, it's your e-commerce, it's your email, it's your social. Be very clear about the things that you're testing and what you're looking for coming out of it, and capture the learnings in a document. And once you have your learning, share it out with your team. Doesn't matter if it's just you alone in the beginning. You still want to have this documented so that you're learning about it and reviewing with the team together the recap for this. But I always like to say, start small, but test fast and share the learnings. If you see something that keeps popping up in your data, you're like, oh my God, this just keeps happening week after week. Test it. Test, take, what's the insight? What do I need to get out of it? Is there something else you can get out of testing something else? Because that can help inform your future product strategy. It can mean you need to test into new marketing channels. Start small, test fast, and share those learnings. So, some of your key takeaways for today are, it'll leave you with three things. Making sure your data is truly driving your insights. Making sure it's guiding your creative decision making. Data shows you what matters, and then using creativity to bring it to life for the customer so that you can end up in that sweet spot. You want to cut through the clutter, you want to cut through the noise because again, attention is the new currency in the world that we live in. It's your visual and messaging. It's, refining it over time. It's mirroring customer language. It's ultimately at the end of the day, how do we continue to make sure that we're building authentic connections with our consumers so that they feel seen and that you're no longer having this leaky bucket with people coming in. You're going to have people staying within that space for your brand and coming back time again, and then sharing with others how they love it. And then also third, your team piece of it. It's about alignment. It's turning insights into shared knowledge. It's making sure you have that one page profile of your customer profile, who they are, so that when every new person comes on board to your organization, I always like to share this is who our customer is. Paint that picture for them so that they know the work that they're doing is rolling up to this person and how we're creating experiences for them so that they stay with us over time. And then also recaps, keeping the teams focused. And also, there's a sense of pride in understanding the work that you did and how it drove an outcome within the brand and the customer felt seen. And I started with this, but I will end with this as well. The customer should always be at the center of all of your decisions in your brand. When you're making a decision, think about, does this make it easier for a customer? Does this make it harder? As you're creating new promotion strategies to market, does this make it easier for my customer? Does this make it harder? Does my customer need to have a calculator in front of them to figure out what's going on? Does my associate need to have, a calculator? Can my associates answer these questions? How do we make sure that all the experiences we create in our brand for a customer is truly seamless, it's truly frictionless, so that they can stay with us over time and continue to fall in love with our brand, as well as tell other people about it as well. And so lastly, would love to stay connected with all of you. Feel free to take a picture of, screenshot this or connect with me on LinkedIn. Always love to hear from everyone and what they're working on. And so now we'll turn it over to the Q&A section.
Tasha, that was incredible. You've probably seen it in the chat, but really incredible presentation and just the flow was really great, but I'm a sort of data wonk in the marketing world, so this really spoke to me, and I'm sure it spoke to a ton of people
I'm
in
glad.
in this session. I'm going to ask a personal question because I
Yeah.
know that we have a lot of people in our community that are solopreneurs, that don't have data teams, that don't
Yeah.
have the data knowledge,
Right.
and really could use this. Are there any tools that you would suggest for people who are sort of running their business but not a marketing person, or running their business and not
Yeah.
a data analytics person, that they can apply to all of this incredible information? That's sort of the
Yeah.
first
So
first
as
question.
a solopreneur, and I always say, try to get your hands around Google Analytics, right? Especially if you have an e-commerce. They've changed it over the years, so it's become even more complex, and there's a lot of content out there. Learn how to understand what are the key pieces for your business, because when you can understand those key business pieces of it, you don't need to know how every single thing works in it. But I always say, and also in Shopify, if you have an e-commerce store as well as a brick and mortar store, understand things like what is your average order value? How many times people are coming back? What is the channel that's driving all the traffic? Are people coming in through Instagram? How do I feed that, right? Oftentimes in marketing, I always say everyone's a marketer, right? Because marketing is so visual.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, you need to do this. You're like, I'm one person. Find out what works in your business with the tools that you do have. Your goal is not to be a marketer, but it's to glean the insights that
Mhm.
can help grow your marketing. So if you know that, I'm making this up, Instagram is where you're driving everything, don't split your attention and go somewhere else where you're like, well,
Yeah.
that doesn't do anything because everyone tells you to be there.
So one of the questions that we had in the Q&A is, how do you interpret the data from Google Analytics? And I'm going to let you answer that, but I just want to double tap on the thing you were just talking about. Google Analytics has a thing in the upper right-hand corner called Insights. Click that button. They have people that will automatically tell you, I say people,
Yeah.
AI, but things that will look at the information that's already a part of your site. Use that button and take a look there and see if there's anything that pops up that you don't even have to go in and dig in there. So
Yeah.
double tapping on what you were saying, but please
Yeah.
feel free to dig in a little bit more about
Yeah.
how does one interpret Google Analytics?
Yeah, so it provides you with a lot of information. It's a lot of great information, but I would say start using tools like ChatGPT,
Mhm.
right? Take a screenshot, throw it in there. It's like understanding your different, one of the great things about Google Analytics I love is the different time frames you can look at.
Mhm.
It's how do you make sure how did I do against this week versus last week? What are the things that spiked? What are the sources that people came in from? How did I perform against last year? Like, I think that's where, especially
Yeah.
when they're in the beginning and you're building your forecasting, like, look at your performance and say, I had this huge spike last week. Where did that come from?
It goes back to sort of your example of the white dresses, right?
Yeah,
That's a seasonal
right.
analytics thing. You wouldn't see that unless you were looking
Correct.
at seasonality and looking at
Yes.
spring in 2025 versus spring in 2024
Exactly.
versus
Right. And then an
winter.
example, now
Yeah.
I had this huge spike that came out of a result of, an award show happened and I sold these dresses that would look similar to it.
Hmm.
But then you're thinking about planning next year. You're gonna be like, how do I anniversary that? How do I think about my business and I protect those dollars? But don't be afraid to leverage ChatGPT to help you do a lot of this analysis. We have all these tools that are now available to us. Leverage it and help it understand your customer, but also how do I use this for future planning is really
Hmm.
where also the magic happens as well. And also, I like to say it can be simple. I've worked enterprise level marketing. Sometimes things come out of like, hey, that's a really interesting hat. We sold 50 of them. Why is that? Oh, an
Hmm.
influencer wore it. Okay, how do we add more to this? Maybe
Hmm.
an email needs to go out and says, currently trending on TikTok.
Yeah.
That'll get someone. So it doesn't have to be super complex. It can be a
Yep.
little insight that you can use.
Thank you. The next question comes from Dan Ashley, and it says, if you have a wide range of customers, how do you handle the ICP? Do you create an umbrella profile or multiple ICPs?
Yeah, so it really depends. I would always say understand what are those ICPs and tie it back to your spend. I'm sorry, the revenue. So if you realize that like 80% of your spend is revenue is coming out of those top two, that is where you focus. So oftentimes in bigger brands, it's a similar strategy that's used. You can have six customer profiles, six, but all of our sales are coming out of the three.
Hmm.
So you will only focus on those three because your sixth profile might be the person that only shops you during clearance time. And you only have clearance 3 times a year. So that's when
Yeah.
you're going to see them. So there's no sense in spending a lot of resources trying to get that person to convert
Hmm.
if they're like, I only like you during January and July. Right? So
Yeah.
focus on where the revenue breaks out for them and then invest based on that.
So there's two questions that are sort of related that are together, and sort of the first question is how do you get this information for the service industry, and then the next question was I am a solar entrepreneur, but I don't have a tangible item I'm selling. I'm selling a resource or service. How do I put those? How do I turn that same information
Yeah.
into analytics that I can use for marketing?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So if you're in a service space, you should absolutely have your own customer retention platform, a CRM, whether it's a tool that you're actually using where you're implementing and tracking your sales cycle, or sometimes it might just be Google if you're getting started, right? And a Google Sheet, and it's who are the people I'm meeting with, who are the type of people, creating the different customer profile, and then understanding like the different touch points, how many times I have to touch this person when until they convert to an actual client. So instead of it being like Google Analytics, et cetera, for you, it's an actual customer CRM flat platform that you can invest in because it's going to track every single touch point. But also for you, you can start categorizing the type of clients you have within there, right? You might say, these are the brands that are 7 figures. These are the brands that are 6 figures. These are the brands in this industry. And then that can share analytics. And then you might say, hey, I noticed that whenever I work with the 7 figure clients or brands, I convert them a lot faster.
Yeah.
That's an insight. Or you can, if you're like, I'm not ready to invest in a tool like that, use Google Sheets and start tracking because that's the only way you'll find the patterns.
On top of that, I just want to, if you aren't
Yeah.
ready for CRM, use tracking links. Start
Hmm.
thinking about the different touch points
Yeah.
and really look at, if you're not feeling very savvy, just add a tracking link to your email or add a tracking
Yeah.
link to a special promotion you're putting out. And then you're going to be able to start seeing which ones are the things that lead to. And if someone is
Yeah.
being hit by multiple touch points, look at what was the last one that made them convert. That most recent one, the one that turned into that moment of conversion too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so Alexis Romeo, I hope I'm saying that right, just asked, where do we get data when we're just starting new? How do we figure out where to start?
So when you're just starting, your data is actually going to come from the industry that you're in. So it's going to be broad strokes. And as you build, that's when you're going to start collecting. So if I was starting a new, making it up, skincare line, I would look at NPD data. I would look at the
Mhm.
industry and what's happening within the brands within my competitive set so that I can get a sense. But until you start going and putting things into action, that's when you can understand what's going to work from you. But at least you're using the industry as the benchmark in the beginning. But you're going to get lots of data very quickly.
Uh, Dr. Marlene Greenleaf asks, how often should you perform a market analysis for your business?
Market, market analysis for your business, depending on the stage that you're in, I would say looking at it seasonally.
Mhm.
To start, I think that's manageable because I feel like we're living in a world right now, markets are shifting very quickly, right? I think about the retail industry, all the different things that are impacting it right now. I think seasonally is fair for a market analysis, but the world is shifting very quickly. So,
And I'm curious what you think about this, Tasha. I sort of would also recommend looking at it post campaign, right? So if you have a campaign that you're setting up, trying to look at the results of that campaign on an ongoing
okay.
basis, that's in sort of often something I sort of use as a time period, as a time mark, set up a
Yeah.
time frame for a campaign, and then look back
Yeah,
towards what worked.
absolutely. If it's a
Mhm.
marketing campaign versus a market analysis, to me, marketing
Yeah,
analysis is more
sure.
broader industry.
Yeah.
But if it's a marketing campaign, depending upon whatever it is, like giving it enough time to work, establish your, your benchmarks and learnings and all those different things, Yeah, it depends. Like a few weeks, it can be sometimes if you're doing creative rotation, that's going to impact it as well. But I think the most important thing is I mentioned, the recap, having that like a week after and building that muscle of doing it like at least a week after the campaigns happen.
So Lisa Williams asked, how many customers should I talk to as a startup?
It really depends on what your product you're building, to be very honest. There isn't a wide like 5 or 10. It really depends. But I also think it depends on why you're building that product. What is the need? What is the data that you built it off of in terms of is this a need and is it truly meeting the need of that? But in terms of like a focus group, I would start with at least like 10 people of various background. But again, it goes back to who you're serving. I would not count the person, a family member. Sometimes they're like, it's wonderful, it's great, like at least 10 people, but it also goes back to what exactly you're building, the need for it, and what's in the market right now.
Uh, Related to that, Lisa Williams asked, and I apologize, might be a typo in here. I might be reading it wrong. It says, how many should I hold on, how many people should I include in a deep dive focus group, or how many questions?
Oh, got it. Okay, okay. Your deep dive focus group, you can have 4 to 5 people. The questions, it's less about how many questions and it's more about the type of questions you're asking and what you're looking for. So you might have a question that focuses on this topic and double tap into 2 more and then this topic and double. So it's more the quality of the questions and what you're looking for versus how many questions. Because you can have a focus group and then it leads to something else, kind of like the example where I talked about you're all about I'm low cost, but then they're like, actually, no, you're easy to use. That's why. So you might want to dig more into that. So,
It's great. Okay, so there's two more questions, but we're very close at being end of time. So I'm gonna. Sean has asked, what free trainings are available? And I know we obviously have a ton at the Nasdaq Center. So please feel free to look at our classes we've already put up into the world. They're on YouTube, so you can just look for our marketing playlists. But also, Tasha, do you have any other suggestions for places you can find free trainings on this type of work?
I would definitely, like to your point, lean on the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center. There's so much information out there. I would lean on that direction. I know there are places also like Maven.com where there are a lot of D2C e-commerce retail brand contents that are out there. I think one good thing that I like to do is like there are lots of summits and conferences out there that push out a lot of good content. It's finding those that are in your respective industry and then looking at also the content that they share with people as well after those conferences because you can get folks
Mhm.
from all, Fortune 100 to 500 startups and hearing from real life operators what they're doing as well.
Yesterday was Martech, everyone. So if you haven't had a chance, you can sign up for Martech and they'll show you what was the classes that came out of there. And
Yeah.
there was some really fantastic stuff that came out of it. Oh my gosh, there's so many more questions. I don't think we're going to be able to get to them, but there was a question asking about best KPIs or performance metrics we should use to track effectiveness. And then the other was the main difference between market analysis and user research. I don't think we're gonna have time to get to that. Those are really big
Big
questions.
questions. Those are other
Well,
sessions on their
maybe we have you
own.
come back for another session.
Yeah, this was
But I just
fun.
wanted
Thank
to
you.
quickly ask you, please
Mhm.
share sort of a couple key takeaways you want this audience to leave with that they
Mhm.
can go and share and talk about this incredible class and use to use to make their businesses better. I'm going to go off screen for it too, so we have you
Yeah.
sharing wide and big.
Yeah, I'll just make sure. I would just, double down on making sure your customer is truly the center of all of your decisions in your brand, taking a look at what they're saying about you out there. I know sometimes it can feel tough, but it's like, what is the customer saying? What are they buying? What are your competitors doing? How are you shifting as we move on? Because we're living in a world that's constantly evolving, but making sure that you are understanding the trends, keeping abreast of the changes, and keeping the customer at the center of that, but not being afraid to survey poll them, focus group them so that you can get the insights and provide the best experience possible for them.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Tasha. This was a great presentation.
Thank you for
Um,
having me.
Our team will be sending out the presentation and the link to the video after this event. So, and all of your information will be included there. So please connect with Tasha. Come to more of our classes. Please share everything far and wide. We would love you to be a bigger part of our community. And if you haven't yet registered for one of our programs, please sign up for Milestone Circles and Milestone Makers. We're currently recruiting for our current cohorts, and we would love for you to be a part of it. And feel free to invite all of your entrepreneur friends to join as well. So
Awesome.
thank you, Tasha. Appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.